Good evening. This is CTV News for Monday, February 23rd. I'm Patricia Vallone.
And I'm Sonia Shavas. We're glad to have you with us tonight. Well, it's nearing the end of a 2-month process to gather input from law enforcement agencies on how they can improve policing around the nation. CTV's Alexis Hatfield attended a listening session today and has more on their recommendations. Alexis?
Law enforcement leaders and organizations, as well as members of the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, met here at the night studio right behind me here in the museum. Topic of discussion today was on officer safety and wellness. Today's listening session stems from an executive order put into place by President Obama to help find ways to improve police perception and involvement in communities. The public platform was one of many opportunities to gather feedback. One area of focus, improving mental health of officers. Testifiers from across the nation provided recommendations such as implementing stronger policies on wearing bulletproof vests, driver training, stiffer penalties for crimes against police officers, and how to improve the image of law enforcement. While the meeting focused mainly on safety and wellness issues for officers, I asked William Johnson, Executive Director of the National Association of Police Organizations, how forums such as these spark a national conversation.
So I think the men and women out there, the feedback that we've got from them is that this is a great opportunity. It's important to try to establish the dialogue and keep the dialogue going, both for the officer safety as well as the community safety, that we can kind of break down the barriers and stop seeing the community or the officer as the other person, that they're not one of us, but rather break down the barriers so that if you're a police officer, you feel, yeah, I'm one of them, I'm one of the community. And if you're in the community looking at an officer, you say, yeah, he or she, he's one of us. Members
of the President's Task Force will have to take all the testimonies into consideration and provide a report by March 2nd to the President. At the museum, Alexis Hatfield, CTV News.
The President's Task Force will hold another public listening session in the district on February the 24th, starting at 8:30 a.m. at the Ronald Reagan Building. Well, the first of a series of town hall meetings aimed at young men of color kicked off this weekend at First Baptist Church of District Heights. Our Byron Scott was there and has more.
If you around here, we're going to lock you up. So lock me up for what?
At First Baptist Church of District Heights,
after this meeting, you get stopped like that again, that you don't feel was right?
Police, pastors, politicians, attorneys, and others listen to the concerns of young men of color.
I've had the police put guns in my head. I ain't did nothing.
Even if they were dead wrong.
The weekend event called Saving Our Sons is part of an ongoing discussion between law enforcement, the courts, and residents.
And it's not just another conversation. We're actually going to have some solutions here.
As we mentor to these young men, how do we teach them how to engage the police in the proper way?
It's been my experience that when you're stopped by the police, whether you're on the side of the road or you're stopped on the street, there is no way in the world that you can control that situation.
Attorney Kamara Mintz is a former police officer and prosecutor.
We need to make sure that our young men need to understand that they need to be respectful. I know there's a lot of young men out here with a lot of machismo, and they want to feel like they are maybe untouchable, they don't want to be soft. I get all that.
I really don't know what to expect.
Malik Fry says he came out of curiosity.
I just think it's a good thing, just rather be out here than doing nothing. I didn't have to work today, so instead of just sitting around the house, I figured I'd just come out here and see what everything was about.
I want to know what's your suggestion to the younger men in here, what they need to focus on to not get to the police.
Key to making this work, according to organizers, is to have an ongoing conversation. To that end, they'll be having another meeting in a month. In District Heights, Byron Scott, CTV News.
A recently introduced federal tax reform package was the topic of discussion at the Maryland Chamber of Commerce this morning. U.S. Senator Ben Cardin held a roundtable discussion on his legislation, which centers on a progressive consumption tax and would overhaul the current system, eliminating liability for most Americans.
What I hope to do is go over what tax reform should accomplish. And number one, should make America more competitive. Should be fairer to middle-income families. It should be pro-growth for jobs. And I think my proposal for a progressive consumption tax is the only way we can really achieve those goals, where middle-income families will actually pay less, that we'll have the lowest tax rates in the industrial world, and that we can have a pro-growth policy and a predictable policy. So it's a chance to talk about how we can reform our tax code to make it work better.
Cardin's bill, the Progressive Consumption Tax Act, would generate revenue by taxing goods and services rather than income. Well, Maryland veterans plan to lobby legislators this week to push for a measure that would eliminate taxes on all military retirement income. House Bill 482 will be heard before the Ways and Means Committee on Friday afternoon. Commander Mike Moore of the Greenbelt American Legion says the measure would truly help those living on small pensions.
In Maryland, there are about 5,000 veterans who will be affected by this bill, and they make on average $26,800. Currently, the state law exempts them from the first $5,000 of that income. This bill would gradually, over 4 years, exempt them from 100%. Pennsylvania and West Virginia offer much better deals for taxation for veterans' retirement pay, and then some of our veterans were losing and moving over the line.
And a separate House bill will consider the same tax exemption for law enforcement, fire, rescue, and emergency services personnel. Both motions have been cross-filed in the Senate.
The nation's governors, including Maryland's Larry Hogan, met with the president at the White House this morning. President Obama warned the leaders that the looming shutdown of the Homeland Security Department would affect their state's economies. The agency's budget is being held up in a dispute over immigration. Meantime, in Annapolis this afternoon, Governor Hogan is announcing a new initiative to limit phosphorus and its impact on the Chesapeake Bay. Democrats have criticized the Republican for rolling back phosphorus regulations ordered by former Governor Martin O'Malley. Now, Senator Paul Pinsky has introduced a bill to keep the O'Malley regulations intact. And you're watching CTV News. I'm Sonia Shrivastava.
And I'm Patricia Vallone.